something at the top, you usually see something to gain because they're also corrupt. But the potential in America exists that we do have men of high rank that are protectors of our freedom, and that's the reason they would do this. The model for what is happening in the U.S., what has been happening since Obama was anointed in Chile. In 1973, Chile elected a Marxist egghead named Allende, who promptly began to impose a Marxist dictatorship on Chile. The military moved against him and imposed a military dictatorship under Pinochet. 2 decades later, the military gave up power. Both the reasons and methods used in Chile directly apply to the U.S., although hopefully any U.S. coup will avoid the death squads that became common in Chile. The U.S. is functionally bankrupt. I agree. We're only days or weeks away from worse happening. And we have Bob Chapman saying this fall, it's over. Federal, state, and city, county, individuals, and corporations, U.S. military has severe strains on its resources, its people, and its abilities. And the U.S. military is now subject to brazen attacks at its bases inside the United States, and the political leadership is incompetent. In other words, the commander-in-chief is incompetent. The media is full of lying shills. The banksters, Wall Street whores, corporate criminals are beyond restraint now. Feeding the Federal Reserve and the U.S. Treasury are being done with no concern for the exploding anger and chaos around them. As the U.S. burns, the political, cultural, media, educational, and religious leadership ignore the problems, and they're denying problems or use the problems to enrich themselves. The non-military leadership classes in the USA are beyond reform. You know what, guys? If you have one good senator in the United States today, I'm going to apologize. Otherwise, throw them all out, including him. You want to know why? Without a doubt, we'd get rid of all the bad senators that way, wouldn't we? The leadership classes are simply not relevant to anything in the common sector or to any future events in the USA, and haven't been for over a decade. And the military knows this. The people know this. The leadership classes are so out of touch, they don't have a clue, do they? Military leadership of the U.S. at its highest levels is globalist to the core. However, the lower and middle, and I always like to say the lieutenant, meaning that the upper echelon of the military is corrupt, but the lieutenants reporting to them are not. Why would they be corrupt? Because the civilian sector and people like the president, that's the commander-in-chief, can promote people that will fit the agenda of the political realm. It's kind of like the Federal Reserve's argument to some of the banking committee, including Ron Paul, that says, well, you don't want it to go back to a political process, do you? You can't trust the politicians with the Federal Reserve banking system, can you? Well, guess what? We better be able to trust our politicians or those that are elected and reporting to us. And the reason why we have them as an elected position is because we can get rid of them. That is, if the election process isn't corrupted too. So the argument to not politicize the federal central banks is hogwash. The military leadership of the U.S. at its highest level is globalist to the core is correct. and the lower levels are not. I would tend to agree. So it's going to be a colonel's coup. It's not going to come from the joint level. That's right. The generals have already sold the nation out to the globalists for at least the last 2 decades. The Joint Chiefs have all been CFR members for a long time. What I want you to understand when I read this is this military coup, we're talking about the people, you and me, that have been military, that are in the military, and that are not there for a career as a Joint Chiefs person. And what you are seeing in the intelligence community, yes, question is posed, is there a war going on? Yes, there's a war going on. Between the Obama administration and the CIA, you must remember, don't forget, that Daddy Bush, although still alive and getting older, although not head of the CIA, still has his fingers in the intelligence community and its operation. And the Clintons and the Bushes are in a big fight right now about who's going to get all the money and, of course, power, because the noose is being tightened, and the ruling elite know that it's almost time for the guy to take the last step to become king on the hill, and so they're going to start fighting each other a little more. And I'm going to get into the little fights between the two here in just a minute. And get you some more links. If I've talked about any links like with Ukraine and so forth, I'll be putting them up here pretty quick. Okay, so the Joint Chiefs of Staff have all been CFR members. The highest levels of the military are no longer interested in any nationalism, no national identity. They are out of touch, and by the way, increasingly frustrated and angry troops under their command are happening. It was a group of frustrated World War I veterans which formed the striking core for a radical change in Germany when the Weimar Republic finally imploded. Janet of the Fatherland Security thinks so based on her recent comments. The Free Corps can be either left or right as a cultural condition permits, but my view is that the American Free Corps will be populist and love the Constitution. They will avoid racial stupidity, and thus they will be successful. And the armed militia is a large segment of that Free Corps. The function of our imperial U.S. military will no longer protect the American public and other republic. Folks, you know that if there were intelligence agencies listening to me, this might be considered arrestable information. Now, I'm not talking about me reading this. I'm talking about the information. Their function, though, is to protect society, they being the military that took an oath, called Oath Keepers, and by doing so are to protect themselves if the current corrupt American civilian leadership class thinks the imperial U.S. military is going to fall on a sword to protect the status quo for them, then they're even more delusional than I think they are. The military takes care of its own. The military protects its own. And the military loves its own. Now, I'm talking about down to the sergeant that goes and picks up his buddy that's dead because they don't leave anybody behind. Now, there are these Clinton retreads that are running around that are buddies with our Marxist dictator Obama. Now, he's not a dictator, he's an emperor. That have no idea how much the military despises them. nor do they have any idea how little